All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you happen to have a noise-making device like the one I have in my hand, kindly take it out. Put it into the off or silent position so as not to disturb any of our speakers at the lectern while they're talking. And if you have to move about the room, reach up, turn off that video, go do what you need to do. When you come back, turn that video back on. That way, whoever's speaking is not distracted by your movements. And without further ado, help me welcome our presiding officer, Carolyn Moore.
Good evening, fellow Toastmaster. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome to our podcast this evening. This is Talents Unlimited, where we meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Tonight, we have a treat for you. We have our own Robert Ortiz, who is going to tell us how to cook the perfect steak. Now, I'm very interested in this podcast because I have a brother and he loves steak. And sometimes when he goes to a restaurant that's supposed to cook the perfect steak, he leaves unsatisfied. He always had a complaint. So I want to know how to cook the perfect steak. So the next time I go visit him, I might just have to cook him a steak. So without any further ado, I want to introduce you to Robert Ortiz.
Thank you, Carolyn. And thinking about that steak, I would misspeak as well because the saliva is just going, and it's just something to keep your mouth watering. Now, before we started tonight's podcast, we spoke a little bit about cooking a steak. Myself, I've been disappointed sometimes when I go to a restaurant and the steak isn't cooked the way I'd like it. And just, it's been a bad experience. You ask for a certain wellness and it comes out too well or too rare. How about you, Jim, when you go to a restaurant? Does the steak always, or even at home?
I never asked for well done.
You never ask for well done?
No, medium rare.
Medium rare?
Never well done.
Never well done. How do you cook it? On the grill, in the pan, with what, oil?
I can do it either way. My secret is to use different spices inside my butter. I make my butter homemade, so I have the option to do that.
Okay. How about you, Carolyn? You have any bad experiences? And how do you cook your steak if you have that urge to cook a steak?
Well, I've had a few bad experiences, but the last place I went to in Houston before I left, I had the perfect steak. It was medium, I think it was medium rare, but it was perfect. I mean, it was tender. It was just the taste and everything was perfect. And of course, I had 3 types of bourbons to go along with this steak. I had what you call the bourbon flight. So the whiskey flight, it was 3 whiskey, the whiskey flight. So
I don't know, Jim. What do you think, Jim? You think you could have any kind of a bad steak with 3 bourbons?
Not if you take the bourbon separately.
So,
Well,
and I haven't really cooked a steak, but my daughter's boyfriend, he came the last time he came, he grilled some steaks for us on the grill, and they came out quite well. So, me personally, I have not cooked a steak. I normally go out and order one from a restaurant. So that's why I'm very interested in seeing how Robert cooks his steak. Now, I've watched other people cook steaks, but personally, I've not cooked
Well, there's a couple ways to cook a bourbon steak.
Well, this is going to surprise you. This is going to surprise you because tonight we're going to learn how to cook a cold sear steak. And there are many different types of searing. There's, some people have a machine in, they're quite expensive, where they put the steak in a bag of water and they put it in this temperature controlled water. And then after a certain period of time, they're ready to cook the steak. And the steak is already kind of cooked in the middle a little bit. And I don't want to say cook, but it's starting to take a little bit of color. So that way, when you put it in the frying pan, you get a temperature inside the steak a little bit cooked more. So when you build that crust, you know, everything comes uniform. One of the big ways you can identify a poorly cooked steak is under the crust of the steak. Now, when you cut open a steak, if you examine it, you're going to see just underneath the layer of the steak, the skin, I'm going to just call it the skin, the outer edge, you're going to see a grayish kind of a color. And as you go towards the center of the steak, that's where most of your servers ask, what kind, how do you want it? Well, medium rare, whatever. And only that pink section is only what they're concerned about. And they think that's only what you're concerned about. But for me, I learned a way to get a uniform color from the outer edge throughout the entire steak. And it's going to be splatter free. And I know that's going to be hard to believe, but it's splatter free. And we're going to be cooking at 2 temperatures. We're going to be cooking it at high, and we're going to be cooking it at medium. Now, it's very important to understand that what we're doing before we actually get into the cooking process is we're going to be controlling the temperature of that steak as we cook it. So this is the way it starts. Well, you're going to start off with about an inch ribeye. It can be any kind of steak you like, but for myself, I like ribeyes. So about an inch and a quarter ribeye we start off with. And the first thing you do is you're going to take it out of its wrapper, or even if you just had it open for a while, just laying on the counter, that's fine. But you want to take a paper towel or something to remove the moisture from the steak. You want to remove that moisture. That's key. Okay. Secondly, you're going to just sprinkle pepper only on the top and on the bottom of the steak. Okay, that's it. Just pepper only, no salt. Why not salt? Well, salt draws moisture from the steak, and we don't want to draw that moisture from inside of the steak. We want to keep that tenderness intact, but we just want to get the outside of the steak and get that moisture on the skin, if you will. So we're also going to have a non-skid pan. Non-skid pan. And it's a cold non-skid pan. It's not heated up. It's just sitting on the side there on your counter. And you have this steak that you just had it dried and black pepper only with this cold pan. Next thing you do is you take this steak and you throw it in this pan without anything in it. Without anything in it. Not even on the fire. You just put it into the pan, into this nonstick pan. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to turn on your flame on your stove to high. And what we're going to try to accomplish is by going high, is we're going to try to develop a crust on that steak. Okay. We're going to develop a crust on the steak. So we got the pan. It's cold, sitting on the counter. We're going to put this steak in it. Now we're putting it on the burner on a high position. And it's key. You have to listen here. You have to listen really closely to that steak and visually look at it as well, because there's a lot happening here to determine a well-cooked steak. Not well done, but well cooked. So we got that steak, we put it in the pan, we got it on the burner, we got the burner on high, and we're just listening. We're listening. And what are we listening for? We're listening for the first signs of sizzle. We're listening to that for that sizzle. Once that sizzle starts to take place, once you hear it, you time it for 2 minutes. Once that 2 minutes is up, you're going to turn that steak over. And you're going to time it for another 2 minutes. Okay, so what we're working on right now is building that crust. Now, you're going to see that crust start to develop, but it's not going to be complete because we have a lot more cooking to go. So after the first 2 minutes, turn it over. You have another 2 minutes. And then once you reach that 2 minutes on this other side, then you're going to turn your heat down to medium. Now, this is important because because everyone has a different type of medium on their burner. But what you're going to be looking for when you turn it down to your medium is you're going to be looking for smoke. You do not want smoke. And if you do have just a trace of it, that's okay. But you don't want that burner to be too high. So you want to keep look for that smoke once you turn it down to halfway. Now, remember, we have no oil. So what are we doing here? What's going to be providing that cooking surface? Well, it's going to be the marble inside of the steak itself. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is drawing out that saturated fat, that good marble inside of the steak, and that's what's going to be cooking the steak. So we have our 2 minutes each side high. We turn that medium down to medium, and then we're going to turn it over. Okay, we're going to turn it over. Once we put it on that medium, we're going to turn it over. And then what we're going to do is time it for another 2 minutes. And then for another 2 minutes, we're going to turn it over again. So as you can see, we're controlling the temperature on each surface of that steak. Now, what's happening when you're flipping it back and forth? Well, what's happening is when you turn that steak over, the heat inside of the steak on the upper half starts to dissipate. Okay, it starts to dissipate a little bit, not much, but it starts to dissipate. And now the part that's on the pan itself is starting to cook. So after after another 2 minutes on that medium temperature, you turn it over again. And what we're going to be doing is every 2 minutes, we're going to be turning it over and over. Now, it's been my experience about 5 times per side at the medium flame, okay, because we've already done our high flame. And each time we turn it over, you're going to see that crust build up more crustier every time you flip it over. Now, if you have a meat thermometer, this is even going to be better because what's going to happen is about the 4th time you turn it over. When I mean turn it over, the 4th complete time where you're getting both up and bottom, top and bottom, you're going to put that thermometer in right in the middle of the steak itself. Not all the way through it, but right in the middle of it. And you're going to try to get a temperature of about 150 degrees. 140 degrees, you're going to have like I don't want to call it rare, but it's going to be more rare than like a medium rare. Okay. Once you get to about 150 degrees, you're going to get to about a medium rare steak. And once you get to that point in time, you're done. Now, when you're cooking a steak, you're going to observe that there's no splattering because you're controlling the splattering by the temperature of your pan, your cooking surface. So you can literally have your body, your hands right up to the pan and experience 0 splatter. So the amount of times you flip over that steak determines on how you like your steak. If you want it medium, you'll probably go 6-7 times, complete revolutions on that steak, top and bottom. Now, when we're done with that steak, and we're all in agreement on this, and that is resting that steak. So after you get to the right temperature of your steak, about 150 medium, still pink, little bit rare. And if you want, as Jim and I spoke earlier, that's where you can add that special sauce. If you want to add that butter at about the 4th or 5th time, depending how many times you want to turn that steak over, you want to add that butter. Now, Jim, just for curiosity, and what do you put on yours for your special flavoring on your steak?
I add thyme, rosemary, and basil.
Awesome. Carolyn?
Well, I think the last steak we cooked, we had a special rub that we got from Menu Masters that we rubbed on there. That was awesome. I think it was made by Tan Fam,
Okay.
and it was a great rub.
Now, Jim said something interesting, and because he's using natural herbs in his with the thyme and sage. So, Jim, in your particular case, if you wanted to do this particular way of cooking a steak, it would be safe to say that to put those ingredients in with your steak after you get that char, the first initial 2 minutes on each side.
Correct.
Because that's when you're going to have those juices and everything coming out, and you want it to be part of your
Correct.
taste. And so that would be something.
Yeah, but I make my butter from scratch, right? So
Oh, do you?
if you're going to make it from scratch, then you need to mix those things in with your butter, so that when you spread it, it spreads evenly.
Oh,
So
so
how
the
much
thyme
butter
and the. Go ahead, Carolyn.
So how much butter do you make? Do you make a lot at one time?
I usually make a pound and a half at a time.
And so what do you use to make butter?
Cream.
Cream. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I
I
mean,
know.
if you get it straight from the cow, it's so much easier. Otherwise, you can go out and you can get heavy whipping cream,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just keep whipping it until it turns to butter.
Okay.
Right.
I
So
know my aunt used to make butter, but
yeah, the when you whip it, you'll see it, right? The buttermilk will separate, and you have the clumps of the butter. So the butter turns your white cream, the butter turns yellow, and all the water, the buttermilk, settles at the bottom. So
okay.
you have to strain the buttermilk to get your butter.
Okay.
And then once you do that, then you add
In
your
my particular
flavorings to the
case, when I
butter.
put-
Say that again, Robert.
what I like to put in mine is garlic
Mhm.
in the butter. And I take about a 1/4 inch. I don't even know what that is in tablespoons, but it may be a tablespoon, I guess.
Mhm.
Like, and I'll put some garlic in there, and then in the butter, and then I'll put it on the steak, and it'll start cooking for for my last 2 rotations on the steak.
Mhm.
So once I get to the steak, what you're going to notice after you put the seasoning of your choice at the very end. In Jim's case, it's going to be his natural herbs are going to be consistent throughout. But what you're going to find is once you season it and cook it, in my case, put the butter in the steak near the end of the cooking process. And for myself, I'm at 150 degrees in the center of the steak. I'll take it out and put it on I just put it on a cutting board, and or a plate, and just let it rest. And they say you need to let it rest for 5 minutes and let those juices just settle inside of the steak. And you just want that steak to just set for a little bit. But here's where it gets amazing. When you cut that steak, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to see the ring of gray, and then you're going to see the center of your steak redder than the ring. Cold searing it, this method, we've already talked about no splattering, but there is a lot of cooking, about 10 minutes worth. But what's going to happen is when you cut that steak open, all the juices are going to come out naturally because we let it settle. But the steak color just under the outer layer is going to be consistent throughout. So if you wanted a medium rare, medium to medium rare, it's going to be consistent from the top to the bottom. Because sometimes when you get into a steak, when you cut it, the center of the steak is not as firm as the outer edges of the steak. But cooking it this way, it's consistent throughout. And I should have done this, but I had a picture and I should have posted it on here. But I will definitely send you a picture of what it looks like. And let me tell you, when it's after you let it sit, and then at that point, I'll sprinkle some salt on it, a little bit of seasoning salt, not much, just to give it a little extra flavor, and maybe not even at all because I use garlic and you have the natural ingredients. But I guarantee you're gonna love it, and cleanup is a whiz because all the splattering and everything is gone as well. So, is it worth a try? For me, it's the only way I cook a steak now. Carolyn, would you have the courage to give it a try?
I have the courage to give it a try. And I may give
All
it a try
right.
soon, within the next couple of weeks.
Like I said, it's very important that you get the 2 minutes initial on high on the top and flip it over another 2 minutes on high. But after that, when you keep flipping it over every 2 minutes on medium, right? We want to avoid that smoke. But on the medium, that's where it's going to get really to your own preference. And I would suggest 5 times on each side as you keep rotating it. On medium, you're going to get to the desired meat temperature, the meat cooking of the meat inside. And you're going to see for yourself that ring is not there. It is consistent throughout. How about you, Jim?
Sure, but
I give it a try.
I do my tests a little bit different. So you're doing it based on timing. So you're using numbers. For me, I'll if I touch the steak and it feels like it does between my thumb and my first finger, right here. If it feels like this, it's done.
Okay, well that'll work too. I mean, and there's no rule about, how they say, well, you're not supposed to lift it up or anything like that.
So how sophisticated are your steaks? I mean, do you just go to the store and just buy whatever's at the store, or do you get dry aged steak or wet aged steak or anything like that?
For myself, I just get the whatever. Yeah, I go for myself. I go to Costco.
So you just get whatever's at the store. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There isn't
know-
anything
I know a lot of restaurants use wet aged and dry aged steak.
Oh yeah.
And when they do their searing process, they actually use lasers. So they'll send it through a laser to sear everything together, and then they put it on the grill.
So what's the difference between the aged steaks that you're talking about and just the ones that you buy out of the store?
They're aged, right? So
Okay,
the ones that you buy at the store, they probably were cooked they probably were cut yesterday
okay,
and shipped, right?
okay.
The aged ones, they age for like 28 days or 30 days or something, right?
So does that make them tender, or what does the
It's
aging process do?
it's a much better cut and tasting meat.
Okay,
It's a lot more expensive, but it's much better.
okay. But you can't buy those at the store? Would you have to go to the meat market, or how would you
Yeah,
get
you'd
those
have
from?
to go to a meat market. You wouldn't get them at Walmart or someplace like that. You'd have to go to a meat market and get it, or an actual butcher.
Yeah. Are there any around anymore?
There
There
are a
are
few.
some.
Well, they're down here. I don't know if they're where you are.
Yeah.
I know in Houston they do have some
Yeah,
that I've been to. The last time we were there, we went.
I'm pretty sure they're all over Texas, right? I mean, Texas is big meat country, right?
And you can get a horn with it.
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I know they do have, they still have quite a few meat markets in Texas that you can go to and buy meat. So,
So as we conclude this conversation here about how we like our steaks, you know, there's barbecuing, and I got off of that because, you know, I got tired of seeing the juices always go down to the bottom of the barbecue. And like Jim, when we had an early discussion, you know, putting cooking oil, well, you know, there's nothing better than using that oil that's that marble that's already in the steak.
Yeah, of
And
course.
yeah. And then finally, I recommended like an inch and a half steak, but this works pretty much with thinner steaks as well. But you're going to have to adjust your time on
Yeah.
how you want
Clearly.
that crust in the center. Yeah.
Clearly,
So.
10 minutes with a thick steak is a whole lot different from 10 minutes with a thin steak.
Yeah,
You 10
no
minutes with a thin
kidding.
steak, you're you're eating the soles of your shoes.
Yeah, I think it starts to curl at that point, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
The thinner you go, the faster you have to cook. I mean, you can get really thin stuff. You get 1 minute steaks. You get minute steaks.
Yeah.
If you get them thin enough, right? You just flip them over twice. 30 seconds on one side, 30 seconds on the other side, you're done.
Exactly. And like I said, the type of cooking that we are talking about is called cold searing.
Mhm.
Cold searing. So, any other
Sounds good.
questions or comments?
You
Well-
talked about some barbecuing and the sauce, and you didn't like seeing it go down. So I found that if I'm going to use barbecue sauce, that would be the last piece I put on before I turn it over for the last time. That way, the barbecue sauce gets stuck to the steak and gets cooked into the steak rather than going down. So a lot of people, they'll put it on right at the beginning, and every time they turn it over, they got to add more, and then you get the stuff like you talk about where it goes down to the bottom, right? But if you just do it on the last flip, you don't have that problem.
And I've actually broiled steaks as well, and had a lot of good luck with that as well.
Boiled or broiled?
Broiled, BR.
Broiled, okay.
Yeah, broil. Yeah, broiling steaks is something that I like to do too. And then, but either way, but the cold, and it's a lot, you know, the cleanup is a lot easier doing the cold searing, especially when you don't have the splatters.
Mhm.
But anyway, I just wanted to share this with you because it was something that I came upon and thought it was interesting. And I gave it a try, and boy, was I shocked how easy it was. It's time consuming.
So
Without a doubt, it's time consuming.
after you do the cold sear steak, right? So you're resting it for 5 minutes before you eat it. Are there juices in the pan?
Yes,
What do you do with those juices?
I'll use it like what do you want to call it?
A gravy?
I'm not gonna like an Aegis, I guess. I don't
Like a
know.
gravy? Okay.
Yeah.
So I
yeah.
was thinking that while it's resting, you would cut up your onions and your peppers and stuff and throw them inside that juice. And then
That's a good.
put that on top of the steak, right? So you get the onions, the mushrooms, and your peppers and all, your spice peppers and stuff, and then layer it on top of the steak before you cut it.
And you know, you could even in additionally to that, you know, you can even put some more butter in there and make a sauce if you
Sure.
want.
Caramelize it all. Sure.
Yeah. So that's a great idea. Never thought of that. So I'll have to look at it from a more creative point of view to do more with, instead of just going like this, right?
Yeah.
Use that saturated fat. And one thing about it, I've spoken in the past about different type of fats and other presentations, but the fat that we're using, this meal is 100% healthy because the fat that you have is all saturated, and it's good for your body as far as energy and everything else is concerned. Doesn't harm you. So eat as much as you want, have a good time eating it, and give it a try. I promise you, you'll like it. All righty.
Sure.
All right, sounds good. So what do you have for your sides? Do you have a side favorite that you like?
Well, normally I would get like green beans or, a salad, or I try not to eat corn because it doesn't digest. And I don't eat corn. So usually just like green beans or a salad or something. But believe me, I have no problem just eating that steak by itself.
No potatoes?
No bait. That's
No,
what I
no
was thinking.
potatoes.
No potatoes?
No. Now, if I do have the urge for potatoes, it's going to be a small, what do you call them, russets or something,
Uh-huh.
just a small potato. That's about it. But I'm
I'll-
always going to have my greens with it. That's for sure.
I'll whip you up some mashed potatoes.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Sure.
I'll-
Put in the
I'll go right
butter. Put in the
I'll
butter
go
and the
right.
bacon and the scallions and the garlic, and put all that good stuff in there and whip them all together.
Well, that's about it, Carolyn. I just mostly just greens, but I've eaten a steak by itself, especially in the morning. I'll throw that steak on there, cold sear it, and I'll use the fats, Jim, that you're talking about to cook my eggs over easy.
Oh, okay. Steak and egg sounds good. That might be a breakfast I might have soon.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd do a 1-inch steak for breakfast.
Well, you don't have to
That
eat the whole thing.
might be a little heavy.
You don't have to eat the whole thing. And one thing about it, you eating it early enough so you can exercise it all. And it give you some energy for the day.
There you go. Well, I guarantee you one thing: you eat a steak that big in the morning, and if you get full, you probably won't eat until dinner. So there
Probably
you go.
not.
Probably not. So, anyway, that's my secret, cold sear. Give it a try.
Great,
But-
Robert. That was awesome.
Do you marinate the steak ahead of time, or you just use it straight up?
Straight up.
What does marinating do for you with a cold sear?
What would it do? Because I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, what
Um,
would it ruin the sear? Because you have the extra juice now?
well, that marination is going to have water in it, right?
Yeah, well, before you do the sear, you want to do the pat. So that's the question. If you have this extra juice that seeps into the steak, does that affect anything when you're doing the cold sear?
I would. That's a good question. You probably not, but you would probably get a lot more splattering because now you got this liquid in there starting to splatter. So that might affect it there. But then again, that marination, if you wanted to, as we spoke about, once it's sitting there for 5 minutes, there's no reason why you can't put that marination in the pan itself and let that cook in there, and put it on there as well. So something to think about. Plenty of ideas.
Yeah, and I also when I'm cooking steak, I always make sure I take out the steak early in the morning, so that it's room temperature by the time I get ready to cook it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I don't want to cook it cold because then it doesn't cook the same going through if it's a cold steak.
Yeah. Well, cold sear, that's why we're doing the flipping there. So we get that uniform heat throughout the entire cooking process. But as you mentioned, that room temperature, you're going to get to that. Probably you get to that cooking temperature internally probably a lot sooner. I would think, because it doesn't, it's already at room, whatever, 70 degrees, whatever the case may
Mhm.
be. So, yeah, so that's a thought. But remember, Carolyn, no salt until afterwards, until you're done cooking.
Okay.
Yeah, I found a good substitute for salt is that, uh, emerald, the BAM guy who
Yes.
throws, that stuff is better than salt.
So what is it? Not the dash.
No, no, not that, not Mrs. Dash. It's emerald seasoning.
Okay, it's his own seasoning.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay.
his own seasoning.
Okay. I have to check that out.
I think salt is one of the ingredients, but it's got the pepper and the paprika and all that other stuff in there. So it has a
Okay.
whole different flavor to it.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I'll set a little, instead of sprinkling the salt on it, I'll have just like a little dipping cup with some, in my case, sea salt.
Mhm.
And then when I cut it, I just tap it, just to get that edge and eat it just like that. And it's killer. It's killer. But but I'm just a salt and pepper guy. But the butter with the herbs and everything, that's only going to make it better. And it's all healthy too, Jim. I mean, the way you described it, it's all healthy as well. A lot of great ideas that come about other than cooking it. A lot
That's the hard part.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Now comes the fun part, is season it to a flavor that you like. So, but anyway, I enjoy talking about this.
Yeah, it
Great
was
idea.
fun. You,
Right.
then you want to be like Carolyn, right? So you got those bourbons going on, right? There's nothing stopping you from throwing the bourbon in with the butter.
I bet you that's good because I had a bourbon pecan pie over Christmas and it was absolutely fabulous.
Hmm.
So that sounds good. The bourbon
That
steak.
sounds like a winner.
That is all sorts of stuff to do with that bourbon.
Yeah.
I was making some batter the other day to do some deep frying, and instead of using water for the batter, I used bourbon.
Mm,
So it came out a whole lot better.
A little
I
kick.
bet.
Well, it had a completely different taste, right? Because you had the bourbon in it.
Yeah.
Much better.
Sweeter. Well, caramelized, right? Was it?
No, it's a batter, right? So you mix the batter like you normally would. Then you
Yeah.
dip your meat in it, right? So it has the batter around it, and
Oh, okay. Okay.
then you put it in the deep fryer, right? And then
Oh, okay.
when you take it out, the batter had the bourbon in it, right? So now you're getting a bourbon taste in the batter.
But that was good.
It was definitely good.
Mm. I have to try that too.
See what you
Okay.
learned?
Yes, I've learned a lot. I like to experience, but see, I like food that tastes not, ordinary. It has a different taste. So that sounds really good to me.
So do I.
So, so yes. So Robert, that was a great topic. I am glad you enlightened us. Like I say, I'm gonna have to try that. I will let you all know how my steak turns out. I will post some, I will have to take some pictures and see what happens.
All right.
Turn
Sounds
around and
good.
make a
Can't
whole
wait to
speech
hear.
on
Yeah, there you
Oh,
go.
yeah.
There you go. Follow up.
it.
All right.
All right. So I think we are done with that. Again, this is our podcast for today. We had an awesome presentation by Robert Ortiz on how to cook the perfect steak. And if you're listening and you want to present that steak, Valentine's is coming up, ladies and gentlemen. That's a perfect meal that you can present for your significant other, or just even for your family. So again, this is Talents Unlimited. We meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m.
Awesome. Good night, everybody.